When you hear the two words summer reading, it might make you break out into hives and go into super flashback trauma mode. I know that summer reading has gotten out of control in terms of what we value and who's in charge and who's doing it, who's it for. There are a lot of questions about whether or not it's actually effective or even worth trying to rescue. I do believe that there is a way to rescue summer reading, and not just because we should. I know that with the summer slide and all of the work that we do to grow our students throughout the school year, the heartbreak that comes with knowing how much is lost, especially from our low economic students. We had got to come up with some creative solutions to make summer reading happen again, but happen in a way that is truly positive, authentic, fun, and engaging. I've got a webinar for you that I'd love to share. I also dropped 2 episodes about summer reading that you can listen to on the podcast. Head to bravenewteaching.com/summer reading to get all your freebie goodies, watch the webinar, and give summer reading another shot. This is one that you're going to want to watch with your teacher bestie or maybe even your team. If you're ready to take the next step, give me a call, give me a jingle. Let's plan it together, or just send me a message on Instagram. Head to bravenewteaching.com/summer reading to get that kickstart you need to make summer reading fun and awesome. One more time.
Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching, and welcome to our 4th and final installment in our collection on teaching the hero's journey. Hello, Amanda. You're my hero.
Wow. Wow. Thank you.
What you all can't see or hear is that she was winding up to say something, and then I totally threw her off by going, "You're my hero."
No, I don't even know what it was, but my heart is full.
Good. It should be.
Thanks. Do you know what's really exciting? So we are at the last episode of this series, and we're like full on launching into camp next week.
I know. It's time for year 3 of Camp BNT starting next week. And it is just the low stakes, nerdy, fun book club. Read what you want. Listen to us talk about books. Hang out with us. Talk about books with us. It's everything that you need and everything that you want and more.
Wow. Yes. And we are not over promising anything. It actually is like a really intensely amazing summer of author interviews. And we have everything ready to go for you starting next. Well, no, you can register today, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And then we will be kicking off the episodes next week. So if you head to bravenewteaching.com/camp, you can see our list of authors. You can download some things. And it's going to be a great camp. I'm super excited, but I know we're going to finish Hero's Journey. This has been a really, really nice series. I think really practical way of thinking through, right? An archetype and a journey and a commonly taught piece, but with fresh eyes, 3 different ways.
Well, yeah, like when we really started Brave New Teaching, a lot of our focus was on doing the things that we already do and doing them in a way that felt true and with fidelity and felt like meaningful and productive.
Totally.
And since then, I'm not going to say that we totally strayed away from that vision, but we have talked about more of the minutia and more strategy. And then we've zoomed way out, and then we've zoomed way in, and then we've zoomed way out, and then and this is like a return to something that is often prescribed in our curriculum, right? Like you have to teach the hero's journey and you must teach the Odyssey at 9th grade. And so I was a teacher that, like, I wasn't necessarily told you have to do that, but I felt like I should. And I also didn't have any other idea. Like, I was like, oh, I don't know what else I'm going to do. Yeah, I'm going to do that. But I didn't know what I was doing. And I was kind of swimming all over the place. And so for me, like, this feels like a back to basics BNT sort of a thing where it's like, here's something that at some point in time you've probably been told, or you will be told, or you will feel as if you must do. So now let's figure out, a lot of the classics are that for a reason. It just might not be the same application that will resonate with today's kids as seemed to resonate with kids of years past.
So next week, our very first interview for camp is with Samira Ahmed. And when we talk to Samira and we talk about her book, Internment, the main character in this horrifying experience, like she draws so much on her knowledge of literature and her knowledge of what she learned in school. And it's just like such a great reminder that like, I know that this character is fictional, but our kids do want to learn things, even if they're crusty
Huh?
and old and maybe, they've been painted a certain way before. We have the power to make all kinds of texts interesting and relevant. And I think this series has really done that. And I'm excited to do today's because I had an aha moment with Marie when we were planning this because it really had never occurred to me. And I'm embarrassed to admit this, actually. I mean, genuinely embarrassed. And it never really occurred to me to think about modern fantasy through the lens of like classical mythology. That had never even crossed my mind.
Oh, and that's like when I want to read something for escape, I'm going straight to fantasy and it's contemporary. Like it's, yeah, well, we all know that I like fairy smut, but like that's neither here nor there. Actually, no, it's everywhere. See
It's
what I did there?
everywhere and every way. And
Oh, yes. Okay, we're getting into weird territory. So you know what it's time for? It's time for another sip of coffee. And while we do that, let's go ahead and cue the music.
you're listening to Brave New Teaching, and we are so much more than a podcast.
We give teachers the inspiration, support, and tools to challenge the status quo.
I'm Amanda, and I'm a former English teacher from Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm a high school teacher from Southern California.
Join us after the show and happy hour to extend your VNT experience with instant access to our resources, workshops, and courses.
Visit shop.bravenewteaching.com/happy hour to join us today. We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show. All right, friends, I think I mentioned this. I know I mentioned this in the first episode of this series, but I think I mentioned this just a moment ago, that I have a unit that is for the 11th grade, and it's actually what we're going to be talking through today is large parts of this unit. It is my American Lit class where you don't necessarily picture the hero's journey or fantasy or that type is normally in like a world literature class, but I teach American Lit 11th grade, and I have brought fantasy and the hero's journey to that grade level and to that curriculum map because I think that it fits so well
I'm
in
obsessed.
a reflective way. Yes, it's very exciting. So,
Okay, but Marie needs to get some credit here because you just do things. And I think that a lot of people are still like 15 steps behind you just doing it because your instincts are so honed. And I think for a lot of us, we have been not only told what to teach, but also told what American literature is.
yeah,
And then we pass that on to our students. And then they kind of get this like subliminal or not so subliminal definition of American Lit as right the 4 books that have been chosen for them. And the
right.
fact that you are like not only disrupting like by bringing fantasy to high school, which is like clutch my pearls, but suggesting fantasy is a component of American literature. You are actually breaking brains right now and
Yeah.
probably making some department people spin around a little bit because
So I
but
can tell
where does
you,
Challenger go?
first of all, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for, because when I brought this up at first, you kind of even gave me you weren't like clutching your pearls, but you were like, are you sure that you're going to be able to like make that work? And I was like, yeah. I had no assuredness that I was going to be able to make a fantasy unit in 11th grade American Lit work. Cause I was like, I don't know, dude, like I'll try. Spoiler alert, this is a choice novel unit that I'm talking through, but you could really use any adopted work that is by an American author or wherever you're going to put this. It doesn't have to be an American Lit class. You could use whatever, because again, it's the Brave New Teaching curriculum rehab style of like our pedagogy that we talk through. Huh?
I can see this at 12th grade, a fantasy unit at 12th grade.
Well, that's kind of where it got its start is when I was teaching World Lit at 12th grade. But then I was like, you know what, though? Why should I wait until 12th grade to do the kinds of like addicting literature that fantasy provides? Like we've got at 10th grade in my school, we've got dystopia, which like hooks kids in. And so I tried in 11th grade looking at dystopia, but I just found myself repeating what we had already done in the 10th grade. So it's like, okay, how do we take that little
Yes.
nugget and keep going? Not that fantasy is any harder or easier or whatever, but it's just kind of a left turn,
Yep.
like of a similar fiction. And don't get me wrong, I do realistic fiction also, looking at like different American perspectives. And then I was like, wouldn't it be cool? We love fantasy. We love like kings and queens and we just, me and all of the people that I think agree with me.
That's a lot of people.
But we love like magic and all of these different entities that are in so much of the like really popular TV and films and book franchises that are like everywhere. So why wouldn't I bring that into my classroom and help some of my students get addicted to reading these stories? And then that kind of started getting into the question of like, well, why do I like them so much? Because they're a total escape from reality. Oh, it's because it's escape. Oh, that's why we do everything. It's for escape. It's for whatever that means. And so then that led into the essential question that I believe you helped me with. And then my co-teacher and I really like refined one day while students were like doing a timed writing. We were sitting there whispering in the corner. Oh, and then we could do this. And then we could do that. And then we could do this. And the question that we're looking at is, why do we pursue escape? Why do we pursue escape?
And okay, so can we do a little stacking really quick?
Please.
Because what's really cool about this series is that we're stacking vertically aligning not just the texts, but also the skills and also the questions. So at 7th grade, we're asking,
are heroes born or made?
At 9th grade, we're asking,
do you have to leave home to discover who you are?
And then in 11th grade, we're asking,
why do we pursue escape?
So just hearing them together, I can see and feel that progression of the skills that are going to be necessary to do all of those things. I can see that the life stage of the kids at each of those points in time is developmentally appropriate and intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're, yes, potentially looking at the hero's journey 3 times over the course of an individual child's life, which, by the way, if you do teach and you're doing vertical alignment, you should think about the individual student's entire experience. That's really important.
It's also really hard. Like, it's also why we're doing this collection in like a way that we haven't looked at other collections before, where we're vertically aligning our conversation, because it's so hard. Like, we get that that's so hard. So just, yes, sorry, keep going.
It's really hard, but now you can kind of see, right now I am with this 11th grader who has the foundation of thinking through heroes and home and movement and coming back and returns and what that looks like mythologically, but also what that looks like in other stories. They have all that background, so that now in this unit that you have set up that is very independently run because it's choice novels,
right?
Kids are now at this stage where when they get to this age, we want the true sign of building a skill is when you can do it independently.
Yeah. Well, and the buy-in of choice is essential here. But again, like I said, I could choose any of these books. And if one is adopted, it will totally work for adopted, meaning like approved by my district. It will work in this whole unit. It just doesn't have to be that, because it's also not the first unit I teach. Like, it's the very end of the first quarter. So I've had them for a little bit. Like, they're trained. They're ready to do something like this. And they're 11th graders. So they're like professional high schoolers.
So we will link in the show notes our episode where we talk about choice novel units. And like, if you're curious about structure and how that all works, you can listen to that episode. But Marie, like, once you go from EQ, we go next to summative. What is the summative for this unit?
It's a Socratic seminar. It's a Socratic seminar.
That
for which,
is.
Yeah, yes, it is. For which they have prepared ahead of time. I give them some preparatory discussion questions, and then and then they come with questions, but then I also have some prompting. I like to do mine like the fishbowl, right, in rounds. I call it like Team Socratic, but it's also called like co-pilot something, whatever, where they've prepared a day or two ahead of time. So then I've got a writing grade. And I've got, like, they're taking all of their evidence from throughout the whole entire unit, which I'll talk through in a second. The supplemental texts are absolutely key. But that summative is a conversation where they have prepared with all of the things that we've done throughout the whole entire unit and some preparatory questions that then beget their own questions. And then when we get there for the actual Socratic, like, when it's day of and we're ready to have an in class, like live conversation, I give them related, but not the same question to get to spark the conversation so that it's not just rote memorization or just
Mhm.
reading off of what they wrote, but they actually do have to think things through and listen and respond in the moment, because those are the skills that I'm looking for. If I'm doing my job right and I've been building off of skills that they've got from previous years of those character analysis skills they learned in the middle grades and they continue and like put on more theme and conflict and plot, driving character forward as we get into like ninth and 10th grade. And then by 11th grade, we should be able to really analyze critically how and why characters and therefore people make the choices that they make. Like, how does their context, how does their situation influence them? And then we're able to take a step back and look at that entire genre of entertainment, of whatever, and how it impacts our daily lives. And the conversations they have are pretty rich. It's pretty good.
Well, I think a lot of that is due to your EQ, right? This idea of
Sure.
escape is so, I mean, it's so easy to hook them in at the beginning and then to just like tickle that idea that like escape sometimes can be really dangerous, right? Like
Yeah.
and like having kids come up with like the designations of when escape is healthy, when escape is unhealthy, when escape is addictive and like detrimental. Like I
Yeah.
love that you can just sort of kind of peel that through the unit. And one thing I wanted to remember to ask you about, because we briefly talked about it, we had talked a little bit about ditching our freebie, right, or your hero's journey specific
Uh-huh.
graphic organizer, and really kind of honing in this time around the elements of fantasy. Can you talk about that? Because I really do like a unit that's structured around some kind of a framework to like, kind of, especially when kids are all reading something different, like to call them
Yeah.
back home. What did you use for your elements of fantasy?
There's a lot of different ways that you can look at this, because until you're in like a graduate or like a undergrad level lit class, you're not going to necessarily get into quite a framework. So I took pieces,
I love that.
but like I looked at key features of fantasy as a way to track what we're seeing and what then is escape, what is like positive or detrimental escape, yada yada. The elements are like magic, supernatural, things that are not necessarily based in science. So that's where like dystopia can kind of come into this conversation, but it's more of the fantastical elements of true fantasy. And then themes like morality, destiny, like black and white, good and evil, that sort of a thing. The setting has to be somewhat of an imagined world. It has to have world building. It has to have, for it to be fantasy, really. Like your exposition needs to immerse you in a world that must be built around you for you to understand what's going on and feel the context. And then there's conflict. That conflict has to be a moral conflict. It has to be a good and an evil conflict. There must be gray, like for it to be age appropriate for 11th grade. But yeah, the elements of fantasy being like magic and supernatural, themes, setting, and conflict are the big four features that we're looking at and tracking throughout whatever text that there are that we're looking at. Of course, I can't remember all of the books that I have in the stack. I also have to kind of rotate through depending on what I have copies of and depending on what kids are into. But one of the most popular titles the last time I taught this, which was just, I don't know, a couple months ago, was Legendborn by Tracy
Oh,
Dion.
yes.
I had just read it because the third book was like about to come out. And so I allowed myself to read the first book so that I knew I was going to want to keep going. It's now a 3-part series. I can't remember if she's going to do more. I hope she does. I also hope we get to talk to her soon. But that is it's a contemporary American retelling of the legend of King Arthur. And it is so good. And it hit right on the head of what students are learning about in their US history and like AP US classes, looking at like the Revolutionary War, looking at, right? Like it was just so good
You have
because they got
Cerulean in there?
so many references. Yes, House in the Cerulean Sea is also, I would say, so there's like 3. Well, and then I also put Percy Jackson. So like talking about the
Yeah.
Odyssey, right? Like I
Yeah, yeah,
put
yeah, yeah.
Percy Jackson in there because I have a lot of kids that don't read regularly. And while Percy Jackson is a much easier reader level to read, it's still like stuffed with
Stacked.
mythology. And
Yeah.
like, there's so many different things that, like, if you understand a lot of the context and the literary and historical context, you're going to get so many more layers and it's going to be a much richer read. And so I would say those are the top three. Oh,
Okay.
and Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, which some of you are going to be talk about clutching your pearls. Throne of Glass is the first
It's
in one of
completed.
the Sarah J. Maas series, and it is fine. There is no spice
No.
in Throne of Glass. You keep going in those series, and I tell the students and I tell like any adults in charge, I say, those are going to be some higher, this is true YA. You get into other books in those series or other series in this universe, and that is not something I recommend to a minor. However, the first one is a true epic fantasy, and it's got a really strong female protagonist. Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, those four books, Legendborn, House in the Cerulean Sea, which is just, I always love because I'm surprised by the kids that love that book. Not necessarily in the way that people are going to think I'm surprised by the kids that love that book, but like kids that I would have thought wanted a high action, like bam, 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 let's go type of fantasy. And they're like, I actually really want this cozy, sweet, relationship driven, like character driven plot instead of action driven plot. It's just the sweetest thing. Throne of Glass and Percy Jackson. Those are the four that were like flying off my shelf.
I love that. And of course, if you really were in this kind of talk about mythological universes, if you really were in this world where like the kids read The Hobbit in 7th grade, I'd love for them to read Lord of the Rings or like anything.
Oh,
Right? Like
absolutely.
it's so cool. But like
The American finding, and that's where it gets difficult finding,
Yeah.
like for my specific class, finding American authors. It's difficult and then it's not. You can find tons of American written fantasy, but finding it appropriate for this age
Yeah.
and appropriate for school is a whole nother thing, whether it's because of like explicit like sexual content or just like straight up gory violence that I don't necessarily need in our conversations.
But 4 is good. You don't need a huge list. You just need the right list.
Yeah. No, so I have a couple others that I kind of like rotate through, but those are the four that are the most popular, I will say. And then we do a lot of rhetorical analysis as well because it's such a character driven, it's a character and conflict driven genre that rhetorical analysis is wonderful because you go, well, what's the conflict here? What are the characters thinking? And it lends itself really nicely to also what I'm doing earlier in the curriculum. One of the supplements that I really like to use is back to another Disney movie, and it's Onward, which is a great, for so many reasons, great pair along with any of these books.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the rhetorical analysis for a second.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not ignoring Onward, but you
fine.
have me kind of on the hook. I love the idea of this unit kind of being the reading part really being owned by the kids and then the instructional part really being owned by the RA.
Oh, yeah.
I think that there's so much to be done with commercials and even movie trailers, like short pieces that focus on that need to escape. So I actually have a unit, a media literacy unit, and we talk in that unit a lot about Jim Fowles' article came out of, it's a little old, but it's called Advertising's 15 Basic Appeals.
Mm-hmm.
And the one appeal on here, right, is the need to escape. So like to quote, right, an appeal to the need for autonomy often co-occurs with one for the need to escape, since the desire to duck out of our social obligations to seek rest or adventure frequently takes the form of one-person flight. Freedom is the pitch here, the freedom that every individual yearns for whenever life becomes too oppressive. I love having like the fantasy, like I said, but with the kids, and then you're bringing in like, this is what it looks like from a money standpoint.
Yeah, real life money. Yes.
This is real life. Like 11th grade is the place to say, you know how we've been reading stories forever? Well, do you know that stories are the most driving piece of how marketing works?
Yeah.
We tell stories to get people to buy things.
Well, that's why social media has taken over life as we know it.
100%.
Yes.
So I love like making space. Like a lot of people think that an RA unit has to just be speech after speech after speech after speech. And I actually typically hate doing commercials for traditional RA,
Yeah.
but for when you're looking at advertising, and like, there's a whole list of appeals here, but focusing on escape is powerful. I told Marie too, like I couldn't not think about White Lotus
Yeah.
when
And
you
I
were
was like,
talking about
what?
this.
She kept saying, write
Well,
down White Lotus. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
no, not to teach it. Um, Definitely not to teach it. But when I watch White Lotus, I first of all feel like I'm watching a Shakespearean tragedy from start to finish
Right.
every single season. And I watch White Lotus and it gets me thinking about questions and like my approaches. And like basically, if you have not watched White Lotus, whether you like it or not, like the premise is a bunch of rich people going to very expensive islands to escape, right? The day to day stresses of being, rich and powerful and somewhat corrupt or very corrupt, depending on the person. And the end of the story for everyone is even when they're trying to escape or in the escape, they're just confronted with everything that they were already escaping from in the real world. Like that
Mhm.
escape is happening when life is really, really hard. You're still trying to escape it even when you're presently at home. And then when you try to escape things physically by moving where you are, then real life catches up with you no matter what. And like just like kind of like that cycle was interesting to me in my head. And like again, I wouldn't show White Lotus, but like that thought process was something that was helping me think through this unit a little bit.
Friends who are in happy hour, I am going to be putting this entire unit in happy hour. So just so you know, it's there with links to a couple of articles talking about fantasy and the sci-fi and fantasy genres and their effect on kids and why they should read these things. And it talks about hope and it talks about escape and it talks about how hope and escape are cornerstones to developmental things. I've lost all the words.
Word.
Things. Yes. And so at every time a kid brings up representation in literature and pop culture, like cultural and other types of representation. And they also bring up that real life will always catch up with you. And so it's like the way that escape is used. What's it used for? Is it used to run away? Is it used to recharge? Is it used to, I mean, it's fascinating. And they always talk about drugs and alcohol.
Yep.
They talk about, like, I always will have athletes talk about going to work out as an escape and like a physical exertion as escape. It's just fascinating how this then cross section of kids can come together and have these conversations. And obviously they make different points because they're different people, but these are the big topics that come up every time.
Love it.
Yeah, every class. I've taught the unit twice, but I've taught it with 5 different groups of kids. And every time this is what comes up.
Well, and then now, right now, I can't help myself, but like, then let's zoom out. Like, now let's look at this in contrast with your next or a unit you've already done with Gatsby.
Oh, it's next. Yeah, after this. Yes.
That's not like, I mean,
Oh, no, it's
this
the
is,
Crucible. We go into the Crucible,
oh my
and
God.
then
Like,
we go into Gatsby. Yes.
whenever I coach people on like writing their year long essential questions or like looking at a year long, this is exactly why I say it doesn't have to be neat and tidy.
Right.
Sometimes when things are unexpectedly kind of closely related, it's better because then when the connection points are made, it's even more like, holy crap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Imagine them walking into Gatsby, having already had these conversations, and then be like, meet Jay.
Yeah. Let's talk about fantasy, hope, and escape, shall we? And then
Ah,
let's talk about
and
what we
drink.
saw Abigail Williams do to convince everybody.
Woof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
Pretty
exciting.
freaking cool, Marie. Well done.
Hey, thanks, my friend. I hope
Hey.
you know you had quite the hand in orchestrating it. And actually, so did quite a few of our like Brave New Teaching community members, because I was bouncing ideas off of everybody. I was like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this?
I love
What do you think about this?
So exciting.
Yeah. So, okay, friends, this went longer than we thought it would because we got really into it.
This is a new idea.
It
And we
is.
had to process.
It is. And I feel like Amanda was saying earlier, like I just kind of will run with it because I have the instinct. I also have years of experience. This is my 18th year in the classroom. So like I'm very comfortable with like, yeah, let's try something. It'll be fine. I've fallen on my face metaphorically and physically in front of kids, in front of other adults so many times that like, okay, I'm perfectly fine being 2/3 of the way through a lesson and looking at students and being like, this isn't working, is it? Okay, that's fine. And that's simply because that's where I'm at. So like, if you're going, I could never, you could, it's just not yet. It's okay.
And maybe you could, but it's with another like passion project, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe this is your musical theater unit, or this is your, right? Like it's something else that see. That's what Marie brought to this, right? Is like she already had this undying passion and drive and knowledge of the genre. So take that and go with it another direction.
Yeah.
We encourage you to try that. And if you want help, Marie and I are here to help you. We want to talk to you, especially we want to talk to you in curriculum rehab, because that's where we're doing this kind of planning and having these kinds of conversations all the time.
Yes, that's where we can take the things that are true to you and we can create like just learning experiences that you can guide kids through that feel right for you, but then also like kids are getting amazing skill building and insight and critical thinking build. Like, yes, all of these things. Does every kid that leaves my class after 11th grade become an epic fantasy fan? No. But have they had really great conversations because I led them through this? Yes. So
100%.
Here we go. Okay. Friends, thank you for hanging out with us. If you do want to read some more of the spicier, let's just really talk about what I want to talk about. Fantasy smut. Okay. Let's talk about men with wings. Let's talk about vampires. Let's talk about maybe even like a little sprinkle of little demons in there. Just follow me on Instagram. Let's talk about it. Okay. I think now we can end the episode because I've said the most important part.
I think we're going to have to, because I'm not quite there. I mean, I'm in, but I'm not all the way there.
Last year, I bought Amanda a Fourth Wing inspired dragon necklace.
Mm-hmm.
And that was big that she even got that far. So listen, baby steps, everybody.
Yeah. Dragons have entered my world as just its own, miracle. Truly.
I love it. Okay. Have a wonderful week at school, friends. Thank you for hanging out with us. We will see you next time, and we'll see you at camp because camp starts next week.
Bye. Thanks again for listening to Brave New Teaching.
We'd love to keep the conversation going over on Instagram.
And while you're there, check out the links in our bio for the most up-to-date events going on in Happy Hour and the Brave New Teaching community.
Thanks for being here, and have a great week at school.